Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9.11, Third Reich events, German gameplay augmentation, units of the Third Reich, the D-Worms mods, LOLO, Tanganyika, foreign aid and air bases, and probably a few I'm even forgetting. Okay, just about everything that sort of works together with this setup of things. Okay. Those are mostly garrisons, a couple of marine divisions. Well, let's see if we can get him a commander, so he'll be well organized when we decide to invade somewhere. There we go. Alright. Well, we're pushing deeper into the Soviet Union. Taking out another. Well, in that direction. We are pushing so deep, so fast. Okay, that's the terrain. You race for there. So we push to there. I'm pushing dangerously, miraculously forward. Keep everybody moving though. How are we doing out here in Africa? Okay, we're attacking into there. Okay, we can't go to that province. Cruiser and air control systems have improved. That is nice. Okay, straight out. We'll do naval HQs, help our Navy be better organized, and armored HQs have advanced as well. We'll allow that to continue. Now, production. And ooh, we must have had so look at all that. That's maybe going to be, and we have yet to need it, but that may be our salvation here in Russia. Because if you remember some of my previous series, what river is it? Is it this one, or is it the Don? I think it's the Don. I often get, you know, large, huge stacks of division just sitting here, no supplies, because trying to bring in supplies via the sea to here, they only get so far, only so far from here, and so yeah, nothing. So far we have yet to be seeing supply holdups. Just so far. I think 3 of these good. Once we do, I am trying to be ready to spring into action. I think these might be enough to move a lot of supplies. Okay, Hans Kammer, we're gonna save you for other things. If we ever use you, attach to your core T for transport. Presumed transport, whatever the German word is. Or do they use the Schlepp? Schlepp, I believe, is a Yiddish word that did make it into the Germans. And the Nazis, the National Socialists, who were trying to rid themselves of everything Jewish, continue to use, like, there's munition slappers and some other types of vehicles like that that use the term, and that is a Yiddish word as far as I understand, meaning Jewish. To schlep things around. Okay, so let's see how far. Let's here for air supply, so they can air supply to here. Okay, well, let's air supply to okay, yeah, here, air supply, just to start sending supplies there. But my idea is to like air supply to this base. How big is it? 2. But like I say, air supply to here, and then from here have an air bridge to here, but have enough aircraft here to do a multi-stage bridge to the east now. Okay, well, we now have a substantial... Oh, do we get some other... Oh, Hermann Goering Brigade. Okay, good. There we go. Let's see, we're going to drop you... Yeah, right about... You don't want to be counterattacked right away while we are completely disorganized. No, not Hipple. Not even a good Hipple. Corinth, I think is who we want. Let's go this way. Korath. Okay, that's it. Let's see, we have a Panzer Group A. That looks good. No, not straight to the Panzer Group A. Let's get to that. Good. Yeah. Okay, now they'll be able to reorganize out here before they're counterattacked, and they need an HQ, don't they? There, the old Hermann Goering Division HQ. Come up to the Brigade Hermann Goering and add yourself there. Okay, well, you're a fairly large air base. Okay, let's drop you here, and I think we're going to create a night fighter group with all of you. No, again, not Hans Kammler. Go back to skill, Cam Huber. Guy who he's organizationally one of the more responsible people for German night fighting ability. Organizing it up. Okay, fighter squadron. Okay, once you get organized, we will. I'm not deploying these guys yet because I don't know which port. I'm still fighting the fuel situation. Yeah, okay. So far, bombing. I'm not going to say it hasn't been useful, but hasn't been needed. Well, let's. There we've got really good divisions coming. Well, maybe we should build some now and drop them in and attach them to some other units. Okay, 2 ICs, and they have piercing attack of 50 and heart attack of 35. Now, Heavy AAs have a piercing attack of 60 and 61 and 60 currently. Now, of course, these all these are variables. They're not a set. Strength. But if we do that, get a bunch of these guys that we can add to somewhere. Now, a lot of our divisions are full. So I don't know exactly where we would put them, but we'll have some of those. So let's start production on them. And move these down. Okay. Those aren't too manpower intensive. I think some of the mechanized infantry divisions are some of our best bets. Now the question here is, okay, so with those 52, 46, 34. 52, 46, 34. Remember those, I have trouble doing that. 66, 33, 24. That's a lot less piercing if I remember. 24 to... I would probably better get right over here. Okay, and... Okay, so this would have a lot more piercing and considerably more hard attack than a Sturmgeschütz unit, but not as much infantry attack. But we're already at 66 versus 52, so that's pretty good. So I think, and if we look at that 16, and assault gun is 60, they're about the same. I think the Sturmgeschütz should be cheaper. Because... Okay. Different armies fight in different ways, and think in different terms. Okay. I really learned a lot watching the Chieftain's Hatch series. The Chieftain, Nicholas Moran is his real name. Learned a lot about it. Like in the American Army, tank destroyers. What's a tank destroyer? And he shows a picture of like 4 vehicles or 4 things. Sometimes they're towed. Which a tank destroyer? And you sort of pick out, oh, those 2 are tank destroyers, and those 2 are, and which are anti-tank guns? And you pick out those. He goes, nope. Tank destroyer is simply something that is in a tank destroyer unit, and an anti-tank gun is something that is in like an infantry battalion. Meaning that sometimes the same object, physical object, is designated as a tank gun, and sometimes it's designated as a tank destroyer. Is their roles literally the same object, which could be a tracked vehicle driving across the field, or a wheeled vehicle. Some of the earlies had sort of a Jeep with a 37mm gun mounted in the back of it, or a Jeep type thing, light truck of some sort. Which is a tank destroyer and which is an anti-tank gun. Well, if it's assigned to a tank destroyer unit, it's a tank destroyer. If it's assigned to an anti-tank, or to like an infantry battalion, it's an anti-tank gun. Now, the idea and the principles are, and I hope this is interesting to you, is that, say, every tank battalion, and I don't know right off the TOE, Table of Organization and Equipment is what TOE stands for, of a U.S. battalion in any one moment. I don't know right offhand, but let's say every infantry battalion has assigned to it 4 anti-tank guns. Okay, so as the front is, let's say there's a frontage of 4 battalions. So each battalion has 4 anti-tank guns. Well, that's useful if there's like a building up in front of you, a bunker up in front of you, something up in front of you that you need to put either a high velocity round into it or potentially an explosive round to it. The U.S. didn't have good, didn't have any really infantry guns like the German army did. German army discontinues them as the war goes on, production of them, I think, as the war goes on, just because mortars are cheaper and are in many of the cases as effective. But like the U.S. may have mortars, but they've got to indirect fire, drop rounds on them. Sometimes that's very good, but sometimes the bunker they're firing at is designed to stop 80 millimeter, 81 millimeter, whatever the exact, depending on which army, caliber of mortar rounds. So it's just sort of ineffective. Not that the guys inside the bunker enjoy the explosive concussions going around, because they do have firing slits and whatnot, but it's designed to not put them out of action. But you bring up, say, a 37 millimeter anti-tank gun or the later 57 millimeter anti-tank gun, and you can put a round right through the bunker, and even if it's a solid shot round, it's probably going to have collateral damage, fragmentation and whatnot, and shockwave, even if you don't actually hit anybody and just give them ventilation. But so you can put rounds through the bunker, and so you can use your anti-tank gun, in specified roles like that. And it's also there's an enemy tank out there. Well, let's shoot it. That's great. And they also have bazookas in the American Army. I'm looking at the American Army at the moment, talking about its tactical situation. And yeah, okay, there's a tank. There's 4 tanks out there. We got some anti-tank guns. We can shoot at them. They got some bazookas if they get in a situation that it's close enough to be able to shoot a bazooka. In the Hurtgen Forest or in the Battle of the Bulge type regions where there's lots of forestry, yeah, you very well might be able to get bazookas close enough to German panzers to knock them out. If you're talking out in the open plains, probably most soldiers are going to want to run away instead of being machine gunned down, if nothing else, by the tanks before they can get bazookas in close enough. Okay, but if you have 20 panzers, even just a local, not a major offensive, but just a localized thrust of tanks, and that's the idea of a mass number. You're 4, and probably depending on the frontage of the battalion, you maybe only have 2 of them that can be reasonably got in place at any one time. Are not useless, but they're probably going to, if you're going to fight those 20 tanks, they're probably going to die, because after firing once or twice from them, and depending on the caliber and depending on who you're shooting at, depending on the conditions, you're far from sure from either hitting the enemy tanks, or if not hitting them, penetrating their armor. And even if you penetrate them, you penetrate them in a way to knock them out. So, and the explosive concussion of going off, you sort of, everybody says, here we are, this big plume of dust and smoke and whatnot. We're over here. Please shoot at us next. Okay, that's what happens when you shoot. I really like on War Thunder, they're now doing much more environmental effects when the gun goes off, including dust and whatnot. But so you can sort of either camouflage your anti-tank gun, so it doesn't get seen, or even if, hey, you're right out in the open, doesn't mean that the enemy tank's going to see you, because maybe they're worried about being shot at, and so they have all their hatches closed. They're looking through their little vision slits, periscopes, whatnot in their tank. So you might be able to, fully get up and, get out there and deploy your gun before they notice you. Because, you may not be waving red flags, but, because you're all in olive drab, and they may be looking sort of somewhere else mostly. So you may be very well able to, rapidly get into the field and take the time to deploy a towed anti-tank gun, or possibly a motorized, carried gun. But either way, you're going to get a few shots off, maybe kill a few tanks, and then they're going to wake up and see that you're there, and if you stayed around, they're going to be shooting at you and kill you. So a few anti-tank guns are ineffective against stopping a thrust of a even modest amount of armor. Okay, that's where tank destroyers in the U.S. design element is. They were specifically designed to operate with infantry divisions, not be part of the armored force, armored divisions. Some may have been assigned, some tank destroyer units may have been assigned to armored divisions sometime, I don't know, but they're designed to be a group of, and generally the U.S. favored very fast because of this element, of a reactive force, not an armored thrust. So they're not designed to operate like tanks, like to smash into the enemy. They're designed to be, on the radio, the usual American thing. We've got tigers, tons of tigers coming at us. Whether they're tigers or not, it's supposedly almost everything gets called a tiger because they're just seeing some tanks. They call them tigers because often they're all draped in, foliage and other things. If you look at pictures, especially, post D-Day, northern France type battles, the Germans are, camouflaging both from the air and from the grounds, and so, the soldiers aren't sticking around to do careful vehicle identification. And so that, and they're reporting their location, and so then this reactive group of, say, 10, 20 tank destroyers moves to where the thrust is and reacts to the thrust. And part of the reason that the U.S. really likes very fast vehicles is to get there quickly and to be able to maneuver quickly. Now, they generally speaking have fairly good frontal armor to some degree, very weak side armor, partially to keep the weight, or heavily to keep the weight down, partially for their tactical ideas, in that they're not supposed to penetrate into the enemy's formation so that their sides can be shot at. They're to hang back, they're to maneuver, to either maneuver onto the flanks or maneuver in front of them and sort of hang back and start killing the enemy, and hopefully survive a few counter shots before you eliminate the enemy. So it's sort of a reactive. So that's a tank destroyer. A tank destroyer in the U.S. forces is meant to be a quick reaction force to an identified enemy threat. Now, I'm sure if there was no, today there's no enemy tank thrust, they don't just all sit back and have coffee. I'm sure they are cautiously, they're very rapid moving, so they move up, fire, and maybe, quick reverse, get back out of position, doing fire support missions. Again, back to, hey, there's somebody over in that building, let's put a 75mm round into the building just for the fun of it, that kind of thing. I'm sure they did a lot of other tankish sort of support missions for the infantry as time goes by, but they don't want to disperse the units too much so that they become ineffective either. The Germans and Panzer Grenadiers, ideally, we've talked about, I'm sure, and about, reality doesn't match, the ideal units often, but a Panzer Grenadier battalion often didn't have enough half tracks to fully move the whole battalion. Often they were sort of like the #1 battalion within the division might have, in a practical sense, 75%, 50%, I don't know. of the required half-tracks for it. The rest made up of trucks. You know, and of course things go wrong and trucks and half-tracks break and aren't functioning. But generally speaking, they would have enough motor vehicles. Battalion number 4 may have just a company's worth, you know, so 20% of the Panzer Grenadier Division's theoretical Panzer Brigade, or you know, armored half-track size. So, you know, just have, you know, so some of the other company, yeah, and so they just have a company's worth. So obviously things aren't matching theoretical realities of what, you know, they want to have for stuff. So we know that. But the idea was to have, like, for your Panzer Grenadier battalions, to have 3, this is that sometimes, and if I'm remembering all this correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, but 3 Sturmgeschütz and 1 Stug 42, which is a 105 millimeter howitzer gun put in, which shouldn't have very good armor-piercing penetration, but have much better much better explosive effect on enemy targets. So that was the idea, was to have 4 of those sort of Stugs or Stug-like vehicles operating with each battalion, so that you have the fire support. And as they realize that, hey, you know, it's fire support on, again, enemy positions, as well as an anti-tank role with the 3 Stugs. You know, oops, there's enemy tanks. Now, they also, on some Panzer Grenadier units, had Sturmabteilung, Stug battalions. An Abteilung is a detachment. It's only in a practical sense. I don't know exact. I think Abteilung, you know, may have. I don't know the exact translation, but generally it's translated as detachment. But it's an ill-defined size, where, like, a battalion has a theoretical size. An Abteilung. And for certain units, it may have a specific table of organization, ideally, you know, for, like, say this Sturmgeschütz Abteilung. But in the idea that you may have Abteilung that are half a platoon, or you may have an Abteilung, you know, a detachment that's 2 battalions or something. You know, it's not like a formalized size unit whenever you see wherever you may see it. And they definitely had Sturmgeschütz Abteilung that were, like, assigned sort of like this would have been to a corps, and then as you stop attacking, assigned to a corps, and use sort of like I was describing a tank destroyer unit, but maybe not as tank destroyers, but assigned to deal with, you know, say again here, maybe supporting, this just sort of ended up being this way because we used them earlier, but supporting some Jaeger divisions, going, oh, well, and they wouldn't have 2 in 1 corps, but whatever. You know, oh, you get to a hard point, a village, a town, or whatever. Oh, well, you know, with 1 division, well, let's put some or all of the support from the Sturmabteilung through that division. 2 days later, it may be over supporting this division at a different town. You know, switching around as needed. It may not, again, be dependent upon or looking at enemy armor as much as just additional firepower as needed on the battlefield. And then they also, now this is where we're getting at the reasons why they made so much, to the point of once one of, I think it was Alket, but I'm not sure, one of the Sturmgeschütz factories gets bombed by the Allies, and the Germans need more Sturmgeschütz. What are we going to do? Well, Sturmgeschütz, again, and I've probably talked about this, I'm sure, in some series in the past. You know, some of you guys have been around since the early days, and I love you all, but you got to rehear me because I also know people have just found me too. So and they haven't watched everything in the past. You know, the concept of it was set up by sort of von Manstein with the idea of a, you know, lots of frontal armor, small target area. You know, you don't have a turret on it. In some cases, concrete added to the metal, and to sort of attack, whether it's the Maginot Line or some other fortifications, to roll up to really hard points at the enemy. You sort of know, you know, you've identified where their bunker is, and they've got a gun, whether it's an anti-tank gun or just some sort of artillery piece. They've got a gun that's shooting at you, and you've got armor to sort of like take the impacts and move up your 75mm bunker busting gun, as it was at the time, high explosive, not an anti-tank gun, and blow it up. And so you don't have to worry about the sides so much, in that you have infantry around you and you know where the enemy is, and you're knocking out bunkers, but you need to do so under more than just protection from machine gun fire, protection from gunfire of some sort, some levels, and going and reducing the enemy's strong points. That was sort of the concept, where the Panzer IV has the same gun on it, but it's designed to do the same thing, but be more mobile in fast-moving armored divisions, so that you want to be able to turn the turret around and shoot at different directions rapidly. It's not set up as a support case. Okay, well, as time goes on, the Panzer III is too small of a tank to practically... Well, they do squeeze in the short-barreled 75mm gun briefly, but it's a smaller tank. The engine's less powerful. You're needing to put more armor on it, bigger guns, especially the long-barrel 75. It's not a I'm not saying it's impossible to fit one on, because I'm sure they could have fit one on a Panzer III, but to make it so that you got the recoil length and all that kind of stuff inside of the turret in a practical sense, it becomes impractical to continue production of the Panzer III as an effective field tank, with the N as sort of the last gasp when they put the Panzer IV gun on it, and use it as, primarily they used it as a support tank for the Tiger. But so instead of completely shutting it down, as they're realizing, hey, these are good, because that's the whole design, is more or less some minor changes, but is the whole design for the Stug III is a Panzer III. So hey, we can mount a long-barreled 75mm gun on this thing. We can add all the extra armor on it, because you don't have the extra weight of the mechanisms for the turret. You don't have the turret volume and size to need that much armor. You're reducing it down to just armoring the the low sort of, I don't want to call it a turret, but the low gun mounting or whatever, the top of it and the side. And so you're keeping relatively the weight down. The engine can handle it. And because you don't have all of some of the manufacturing time, it is cheaper to produce than the Panzer IV. A Panzer III and a Panzer IV, sort of, or let's say two early ones, 1940s ones, are about the same to produce. The Panzer IV is a little bit bigger, so I'm sure it takes some more resources. But the machining processes, to go through and make the guns are about the same, and it's all about the same. So it's a similar cost to produce. It's more that the Panzer III is the sort of offensive tank, and the Panzer IV is designed to be the support tank for the offense. So that you're looking at, and like originally the Panzer III was meant by, the design concept by Guderian was to have a 50mm gun on the Panzer III, but he was overruled as not being needed, and none were immediately available to do it. So, but we've got the nice 37mm gun, and that's going to be good enough, so let's do that. So yeah, and which eventually does get to the 50mm. So it's designed conceptually sort of around mounting a 50mm gun on it, and it does that well. As we know, that gets to not being effective against, particularly against T-34 still somewhat against a Sherman. They like using the Pak-38, the towed one in Italy, particularly because it's fairly lightweight and they get them up into mountainous regions, and there's still lots and lots of Shermans and other armor and abilities to hit them in the flank. So they really like, even late war, using the 50mm gun there. But it's becoming outmoded, and what sort of saves it briefly is that they have the hollow charge, the Monroe effect, onto the short barrel 75mm guns, so that's why they mount them there for a little while and use that. So instead of shutting down the factory, and of course they're also making Nashorns and Hummels based off the drivetrain and whatnot, and parts of the lower hull elements of the Panzer III. So they're, so that they keep, there's reasons to keep them in production because they're cheaper. Now, of course, you can make, and actually particularly for the Nashorn and Hummel, there are elements of the Panzer IV in that design. You could have just made all of those on the Panzer IV hull, so it just interrupting current production, switching over to something else is going to take time, and the Hummel form worked well enough on the Panzer III chassis. Okay, so that all works. They do it. They keep it in production, and there's good enough reason to keep it into production there, I think. Now, like I say, I think it was the Alquette factory gets bombed, can't make, or part of it does or something, but maybe it's another factory, I forget, that was making Sturmgeschütz. Well, we need more Sturmgeschütz. So you know what they do? They make the Sturmgeschütz 4. Because the Panzer IV is an effective tank. Late war, actually the last versions of it are sort of sucky, in that they, to rush more out, particularly, they remove the electrical motors for turning the turret. It just gets, more complication to make, so just hand cranked. And a couple of other things that sort of production time saving to make it cheaper, quicker to produce enough of them. So you're looking at that. But so they need the Sturmgeschütz. Now, I don't think they would have built, and you can look at some of the detailed facts, but I really don't think they would have built Sturmgeschütz 4s if they were as expensive or even slightly more expensive to build than Panzer 4s, because Panzer 4s were effective against T-34-85s. Now, the T-34-85s had better armor penetration, but the Germans had better optics, better radio communications, better command and control, better in a lot of ways that normally they can be firing first. Normally, he who fires first wins. Now, if you're out playing on a big table, pool table of a wargaming table, and you can see all the way across the table, and you can see the guy on the other far side, and the T-34-85, even if they're crappier optics, take more shots at them to hit them, they can probably stand off far enough, keep that Pak-40, the L-48 75mm gun from penetrating the T-34 frontally, and kill the Panzer IV with their 85mm gun. Probably do that just fine, but that isn't how the world really works. So the Panzer IVs are still quite effective, and they're also effective against most versions of the Shermans. Again, Shermans are upgunning, so they have more standoff range, but hey, I can shoot you from 4 miles away, yeah, and penetrate you, and you can't do anything to me at that range, yeah. But if you look like in the hedgerow country, but there's absolutely no place to be more than 400 yards away from you and be able to, or shoot me, so it doesn't matter, that you can do something if the terrain either absolutely doesn't allow it, or in a practical sense, 4 miles away, no one's parking their tanks and waiting for, to being hit. They're moving them to cover. They're briefly available and you're, you know, trying to do deflection shooting or whatever, you're not going to be hitting anybody. You know, modern day, that changes, you know, with the Abrams and whatnot. But, so, you know, in that sense, you have a practical limitation. So the Panzer IV is good. So Sturmgeschütz, if you're presumably your armor is currently up to some sort of decent level of Panzer IV, Sturmgeschütz should be cheaper, and that's why they were made. We're going to stop the attack and let him counterattack and exhaust himself, and then we will counterattack again. So I hope that was of interest. That's sort of the whole reason for the Sturmgeschütz. Originally, again, for assaulting enemy positions, ends up being a practical alternative to better tanks, and kept in production because interrupting production would cost delays, and secondarily they were cheaper than a full-blown tank to produce, and are not necessarily cheaper in money so much as in production time. What is what's important? Okay. Oh, okay, we have 2 more rail networks and a... Yeah. Okay. Let's go with those. These give an effect, I think, Crimea Rail. Ooh, upgrade rail network to allow the rail and upgrade the German gauge. Oh, okay. Oh, these you should wait on. These are these are different than the express events. The reason you should sort of wait on these 2 is, my understanding is they will only upgrade provinces currently under German control, and not just the whole region. So if you upgrade the Baltics and you miss this province, who cares? You know, it has whatever infrastructure level. But if it's going to, say, upgrade here and upgrade here, maybe, I don't know exactly, as well as upgrade in here, if you want the full level of, and who knows, it may even grab some of this stuff. You want to upgrade everything so the supplies flow smoothly, and similarly, though the Ukraine may be a different area than the Crimea, so maybe the Crimea, but we're not really moving. We're not really having problems there, so we'll do this one. Okay. On July 7th, 1942, the division, the 233rd Division Motorized, is reorganized as the 233rd Panzer Grenadier Division. So this is, hopefully it's not too far east or doing anything important. But notice it wasn't immediately in combat, or it wouldn't have showed up on that list. So we have that here now. So this is, it is really sort of improving from a you know, it's still listed as an ersatz and unit, so it's still sort of more home army, but it's pretty good. Not an SS officer with armored panzer leader skills. No, not Luftwaffe either. We'll put him in charge of some Luftwaffe unit, most likely. There we go. I'm just undecided now with this. Do I send them west or do I send them east? We've got those guys down there. A bunch of other. But as you can see, these are sort of funky French tanks, and so that their stats are, if we look at this one, the stats are sort of frozen. They don't upgrade And that's another ersatz unit. So upgrade. We have some that are motorized. Yeah, here. We have some heavy armor, but they're French heavy armor, so they're still armor. They're still effective, but you can, if you drill down in their stats, they're not nearly as effective as you know, tigers would be for the heavy armor. But I don't know. Okay, they're kind of blue. Okay, you're still in good shape, so try to do something like that. Yeah. Okay, we now have stretch and supplies can actually theoretically flow. Not necessarily the best thing. Same with bombing. Oh, you joined that attack. Add some firepower to it. Let's try and like here. Okay, yeah, take these fortified places that I've had god-awful battles in before. If we can get them while they're empty, I want you to. Okay, we are running out of fuel there. Oh. You can try to fly. Actually, you go to Berlin till then. Rebase to Berlin. Fly fuel and other air supply up to there. No, you're not organized. I don't know exactly when you'll start flying, but get to it. Okay, well, punch through here. Punch through this way. Okay. Partisans everywhere. Oh, lovely, lovely. Okay, probably shouldn't have started this soon, but it's probably set up more. Thinking it's the second year of the war. Probably just so we can more clearly see where the partisans are. Partisans of their own to deal with those in a little bit. They'll die fast. Air Forces. Okay, we've just got Veteran Navy. That battle, I guess, probably put them over it. But they're doing pretty well. Dornhorst, Gneisenau, Bismarck, Admiral Hipper, Prinz Eugen, and Blucher. Cruisers. So, organization regain rate, naval organization, and office recruitment. Organization regain rate, I believe, affects everybody, so that's excellent. Guidance advance for our torpedoes. Good. So we're sort of up to date and doing fairly well with that. Okay, we could do stuff. And heavy bomber prototypes advance. Good. That means our. Oh, we should. I need to deal with some of that. Let me deal with that just a second. Okay. Stop that. Let's look at sort of some bomb load type things. Okay, do that. And mentioning heavy bombers, let's find. I had been bombing Fleet Report B, where am I? Okay, they're just having fun out in Africa. Good for you guys. Here we go. Still have a city being occupied by the enemy. Yeah, strategic bomb there. Good. I know we'll capture that city soon, but I'm just trying to lower their morale, as it were. Oh, we were looking. Oh, back. Oh, man, I got distracted. I was doing this. Man. Sorry, the talks got me distracted. Wow. Okay. Though I enjoyed talking about that. So that's sort of, and this is what I look at now. Obviously, some of these cost effects are all the various technologies. I totally get that, and it just this picture here, and well, you probably see it better here. These pictures down here are to some degree are for immersion, okay? But since this is black ice and I guess they're presuming that Schwer SS are captured heavy stuff. I don't know exactly. And that's, you know, Panzer I here, so I don't know why this light armored battalion is having this picture. And this is, yeah, well, obviously early on this is a medium tank. Now, later war, you might be considered light. I would, you know, light compared to a Sherman, sure, certainly. But I really sort of want, if not the exact stats of this model of Panzer IV, is to sort of kind of be the models to have a relationship to their images. And there's a whole sort of, it's a sort of a messy string of stuff that I've played with in the past. So yeah, if we're running, if these armored regiments are running, should be running, whether they're Panzer IIIs or IVs. If they're IIIs, they're still primarily, they're still sort of, would be late IIIs, which would be more expensive than Sturmgeschütz. And you know, so it should all work out. They should, for whatever reason, you know, radios or something, add to ICs. Great, yes, you're making radios, you're putting them in there. They're specialty components, so they take a little more production time. Totally with you there on that. But both Sturmgeschütz and tanks had radios, so it's that kind of a thing that they both should have them. Okay, that versus... Okay, that keeps them going fast, but how does... oh, well, we were going to do armored battalion, which keep it moving fairly quickly. Well, let's do, it's going expensive, we're going to do that. Don't want to do, because we do have fairly good penetration. Well, now, if we were to do... MTDs 10. What are these supposed to be? These tank destroyers. Heavy, okay, but using the same symbol, heavy anti-tank. There's medium, which oh, they're okay. Well, and you see, again, you know, okay, they're calling this. Well, let's see. You know, what's the difference between this? One's pointed in the other direction. They both are mounting the same gun on it, unless one is claiming to be an L43 and the other is an L48, but I don't really think so. Or maybe a little bit, but really the tank destroyers for Germany should not be Stugs. They should be Jaegers. And if they're the medium, if they're not these guys, and or martyrs, you know, martyr, that's on a low range tractor, but on a, you know, martyr 2s or martyr 3s is what I would consider what these guys should be. So let's go back to this. I just want to quickly see. Sorry. Heavy, yeah, that's just supposed to. No, that's hardly a heavy. 50 mil heavy tank gun. Yeah, again, this is what's important for the game. This is immersion, but try to make them okay. They're both. That's the same gun. Just one is towed and one isn't here for these pictures. Medium TD. So okay, medium TD. Or not right here. Okay. So let's remove that and that, and then let's look at medium tank destroyer. So we're at 30 there, but we've got 50, 62, 80. Now that, oh well, let's get rid of the other because we're messing up. 55, 55, 50. Versus 52, 53, 54. Okay, so, but notice this is 16, and what's the cost again on this with this? 22. But this is a lot more effective. So yeah, this is more effective here. be reworked. More costly. Okay, well, more costly. So let's throw in some armored cars, some self-propelled artillery. Getting expensive again. There we go. Not gonna go for armor. That's too much cost, I think. No, man. It's slowing it down. Slowing it down too. So well, I don't know why engineers, motorized, they should speed them up. Engineers keep things moving. That's almost 3 times as much. Okay, well, we've kept it at 7, but at 7 kilometers per hour, we can get rid of that, I think, and have regular artillery, which would be cheaper and still rather effective. Part of it is this whole thing, is you want to balance it out. We don't have an armored, but we have a direct fire, which is stuff that engineers. So reasonably good, reasonably well. Lots of hard-hitting stuff here, as you can see, with all of this. 80, 62, 50. That should deal with a lot. And we've kept it under 30 ICs. So that now, if you were to change that to a Jag Panzer IV type thing, model, they're pretty good. And they're pretty nice. And the later models, once you get the higher velocity guns, they have the L71 gun mount in them instead of the L48. Now, you see, you have the Panzer IV. Briefly, there's the L43, but it's the primary sort of gun we think of, the 75mm, is the L48. The L48 represents basically how big the length of the cartridge is behind the projectile. Okay, that's the basic element of it. The higher the number, the longer it is. There's like the little teeny infantry guns that they have, the little short-barreled ones. Those are L12s, 75mm, but they're L12. Now they're also sort of straight back, more or less, cartridge to them, so the whole cartridge is like 75mm in diameter. Where the L24 75mm gun, which you find in the first models of the Panzer IV, or in the first models of the Sturmgeschütz, the short barrel, that's the L24. Now that, if I'm remembering everything correctly, the gun gets, the chambering gets wider than the 75mm. It flares up, you know, like you see on like a modern bullet, but it's wider than the actual projectile. So that's an L24 gun. Okay, so, but you can just see an L12, L24, they're getting longer, getting bigger. Then you're going to the L40 series. Basically L48 is what we ideally sort of think of as the long, high velocity 75mm gun on the Panzer IV. That also gun is the basic Pak 40, the towed gun. The Pak 40 is, you know, is set up more for being towing. Not just that it's mounted on a towed carriage, but some of the, we'll call them doohickeys on the gun, are set up more for open field uses versus mounting them inside of a tank. But it's the same, uses the same ammunition would be a good term for it. And so the L48 gun gets mounted in Sturmgeschütz, gets mounted in Panzer IVs, and then they come up and they work on it, and there's sort of two models, the Vomag and the Alcat The Elket does end up getting produced, but it's not as good as the Vomag version of the Panzerjäger. And the Germans are taking a different tactical view with their tank hunters. Instead of really fast vehicles to react to the enemy, they're using vehicles that are really well protected, particularly from the front. Again, the idea is that you're employing them against known enemies, meaning they're not like, you may watch, I hope you do once in a while, watch me playing War Thunder. We're just driving tanks around, where in reality there's normally a screen of infantry, and if they've got radios and they're reporting where the enemy is, and so you got this whole support element going around you. And so you aren't supposed to use these guys here as an offensive drive into the enemy, and cause him chaos. They're sort of maybe waiting in ambush, definitely if you can, but also just sort of reacting to the enemy attacks. And their whole premise is that they can, they're going to put the front towards the enemy, and they're going to be able to, one, have a very small profile, hard to hit, and two, since you only have a small area to protect, you can make it heavier armor. So they put in the L48 gun, the same gun as everything else, but it's just harder to hit and harder to penetrate. What they are waiting on and know that it's coming is the L70, L71, I forget. The gun, the 75mm gun that's put into the Panther tank. But that gun is too big to mount in the turret of a Panzer IV in a practical sense. Not that you can't fit one there, but to be able to move that much longer cartridge around and shove it into the breech and move it around inside the tank, it's just getting, if not impossible, impractical. But they can fit them, the cartridges, the whole thing, and the gun in a lower profiled vehicle without the turret. So you have the two versions. So since we don't yet have the Panther, theoretically, so we can look here. They want to be allowed debt from us, but I've just tried to get off camera debt from Romania and Hungary, but they won't allow it. We'll pay you after the war, I promise. No, I wanted to look at technologies. We can look here. Medium velocity, high explosive, high velocity. Okay, well, maybe the 43 model here will trigger a, once we get it completed, what would be sort of the, theoretically getting to a Panther-like element. We've got sloped armor, so we're well on the way of developing, plus researching here to what would be the Panther gun. But that's sort of what that's supposed to be. You are supposed to port that attack so that they attack harder, but can't easily break the pocketing I'm hoping to be doing here. Okay. We've won a bunch of these partisan outbreaks since they happened early because we have just only recently moved into the area and still had lots and lots and lots of, oh, you attack the partisans, frontline units in the area. Not that they were our rear areas. And we're going to end the episode. I know, look, we only got 2 days done of combat, but I hope it was interesting. This series is far from over. The fast times are pre-war. The really slow times are the Soviet war, because I micromanage it, but I hope it's interesting. Thanks so much. Thanks for liking the videos. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Love to see you around more often. And, of course, please post corrections, because I do get details wrong. Suggestions, comments, tips, whatever. Like hearing from you. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.